Sophia Chen stared at the elegant cream-colored invitation in her trembling hands, the gold lettering shimmering under the harsh fluorescent lights of the small queen's apartment she shared with her younger sister. The invitation felt impossibly heavy, like it carried the weight of a world she had never belonged to. Blackstone Industries' annual charity gala. An evening of innovation and giving, she read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. The address listed was the prestigious Metropolitan Museum of Art in Manhattan, a place she had only ever seen in movies and magazines. Elena Rodriguez, her best friend and fellow graphic designer at their struggling marketing firm, bounced excitedly, beside her on the worn couch. I still cannot believe my boss gave this to me. He said something about networking opportunities, but honestly, I think he just wanted to get rid of it. You have to go, Sophia. This could change everything for us. Sophia shook her head, setting the invitation down on their coffee table, which was really just a cardboard box covered with a colorful scarf. Elena, look at me. Look at this place. I serve coffee and design flyers for local businesses. I do not belong at a billionaire's charity gala. That is exactly why you should go, Elena insisted, grabbing Sophia's shoulders. Your sister Grace needs that experimental treatment. The doctor said it could save her life, but insurance will not cover it. This gala is full of rich people who throw money at causes. Maybe someone will help. The mention of Grace made Sophia's chest tighten. Her 16-year-old sister had been fighting leukemia for 2 years, and the traditional treatments were no longer working. The experimental therapy offered hope, but it cost more money than Sophia could earn in 5 years. The Desperate Gamble 3. Days later, Sophia stood outside the Metropolitan Museum, clutching a small purse that contained a folded piece of paper with Grace's medical information and treatment costs. She had borrowed a simple black dress from Elena's cousin, and though it was slightly too big, it was the most elegant thing she had ever worn. The entrance was a sea of designer gowns and expensive tuxedos. Guests stepped out of luxury cars and limousines, their jewelry catching the light from the museum's grand facade. Sophia felt like a moth trying to blend in with butterflies. She approached the registration table, where a stern-looking woman in a perfectly tailored suit sat behind an iPad. The nameplate read, Mrs. Harrison, Event Coordinator. Good evening, Sophia said, offering her brightest smile despite her racing heart. I have an invitation for tonight's gala. Mrs. Harrison barely glanced up as she took the invitation, her manicured fingers typing rapidly on the screen. After a moment, her eyebrows furrowed, and she looked up at Sophia with barely concealed disdain. I'm sorry, but I do not see your name on our guest list. This invitation is registered to Elena Rodriguez, and our policy clearly states that invitations are non-transferable. Sophia's stomach dropped. I understand. But Elena could not attend. She gave me her invitation because she thought I might be able to help with the charity aspect of the evening. My sister is very sick, and I was hoping to speak with someone about a medical foundation or grant program. Mrs. Harrison's expression hardened. Miss, this is an exclusive event for invited guests only. Security policies exist for a reason. I am going to have to ask you to leave. The humiliation. Before Sophia could respond, a tall security guard appeared beside her. His presence drew the attention of nearby guests, who began to whisper and point. Sophia felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment as conversations stopped and cameras' phones appeared. Please come with me, miss, the guard said, his voice firm but not unkind. You need to leave the premises. Wait, please, Sophia pleaded, her voice breaking slightly. I just need 5 minutes. My sister is dying, and I thought maybe someone here could help. I am not trying to crash the party or cause trouble. Mrs. Harrison stood up, her voice carrying across the entrance hall. Security, please escort this woman out immediately. We cannot have unauthorized individuals disrupting our event. The whispers grew louder. Sophia heard fragments of conversation that cut through her like knives. Who does she think she is? Probably another wannabe looking for a rich husband. Security should have caught this at the door. As the guard gently but firmly guided her toward the exit, Sophia felt tears threatening to spill. This had been her one chance, her desperate gamble to save Grace, and it was crumbling before her eyes. She thought of her sister lying in the hospital bed, so thin and pale, still managing to smile whenever Sophia visited. The mysterious intervention. Just as they reached the main doors, a deep voice cut through the murmur of the crowd like a blade. Stop. Everyone turned toward the voice. A man in an impeccably tailored midnight blue tuxedo stood at the top of the museum's grand staircase. Even from a distance, his presence commanded attention. This was Julian Blackstone, the enigmatic CEO of Blackstone Industries, the man whose name graced the invitation. He was younger than Sophia had expected, perhaps in his early 30s, with dark hair and piercing gray eyes that seemed to see everything. As he descended the stairs, the crowd parted before him like he was royalty. "What seems to be the problem here?" Julian asked, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable authority that made everyone freeze. Mrs. Harrison immediately began explaining, her voice high and nervous. "Mr. Blackstone, this woman attempted to use someone else's invitation. She is not on the guest list, and when we tried to follow protocol, she became disruptive." Julian's gaze shifted to Sophia, and for a moment she felt like he was looking directly into her soul. There was something in his expression, a flicker of recognition that made no sense since they had never met. "What is your name?" he asked, stepping closer. "Sophia Chen," she replied, her voice barely audible above the murmur of the crowd. Julian was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving her face. When he finally spoke, his words sent shockwaves through the gathered crowd. "She is my guest," he said simply, "and I believe Mrs. Harrison owes her an apology." The stunned silence. The entrance hall fell completely silent. Mrs. Harrison's mouth opened and closed like a fish, no sound emerging. The security guard immediately stepped back, his hands dropping to his sides. Guests exchanged bewildered looks, some pulling out their phones to capture what was clearly an unprecedented moment. Sophia stared at Julian in complete confusion. She had never met this man before in her life. Why was he helping her? What did he want in return? I do not understand," she whispered. Julian extended his arm toward her, a gesture both formal and protective. "You do not need to understand everything right now. But you came here for a reason, and I intend to make sure you get the chance to be heard." Mrs. Harrison finally found her voice, though it trembled slightly. "Mr. Blackstone, I was simply following protocol. We had no way of knowing she was your personal guest." "Of course you did not," Julian replied, his tone carrying a subtle warning. "Which is why, in the future, you might consider treating every person who walks through these doors with basic human dignity, rather than assuming the worst." He turned, back to Sophia, his expression softening slightly. "Shall we go inside? I believe there are some people you should meet." As they walked past the stunned crowd and into the museum's grand hall, Sophia caught fragments of amazed whispers. "Who is she? How does she know Julian Blackstone? I have never seen him defend anyone like that." Sophia's mind was spinning with questions, but one thought rose above all the confusion. For the first time in months, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this impossible evening might actually lead to the miracle Grace needed. The ornate hall stretched before them, filled with Manhattan's elite, but Sophia no longer felt afraid. Walking beside Julian Blackstone, she felt like she belonged, even if she did not understand why he had chosen to protect her. As they entered the glittering world of the charity gala, Sophia clutched her small purse tighter, the paper with Grace's medical information pressing against her palm like a promise. Whatever Julian Blackstone's reasons for helping her, she was not going to waste this opportunity. The real story, she sensed, was just beginning. The grand hall of the Metropolitan Museum buzzed with sophisticated conversation and the gentle clink of champagne glasses. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the assembled crowd of New York's most influential people. Sophia walked beside Julian Blackstone, still trying to process what had just happened at the entrance. Julian guided her through the crowd with practiced ease, nodding politely to various guests who approached with eager smiles and business cards. Each time someone tried to engage him in lengthy conversation, he politely but firmly redirected them, keeping his attention focused on Sophia. "You must be hungry," he said, leading her toward an elaborate buffet table. "These events can be overwhelming, especially on an empty stomach." Sophia accepted a plate, though her hands were still trembling slightly. "Mr. Blackstone, I need to ask you something. Why did you help me back there? We have never met before." Julian paused, his gray eyes studying her face with that same intense focus she had noticed earlier. "Are you certain about that?" Before Sophia could respond, a small voice called out from behind them. "Daddy!" They turned to see a young boy running toward them, weaving between the elegantly dressed adults with the fearless confidence that only children possess. He was perhaps 8 years old, with dark hair like his father's and bright, intelligent eyes. "Oliver," Julian said, his entire demeanor softening as he caught his son in a warm embrace. "I thought you were supposed to be with Catherine in the children's area." Oliver grinned, clearly pleased with himself for escaping his caretaker. "I got bored with the other kids. They only wanted to talk about their boarding schools and vacation houses." His gaze shifted to Sophia, and his eyes widened with sudden recognition. "Wait, I know you." Sophia blinked in confusion. "I am sorry, but I think you might have me confused with someone else." But Oliver was shaking his head emphatically, tugging on his father's sleeve. "Daddy, this is the angel lady, the one from the hospital." The memory unlocked. Julian's expression changed instantly, a mixture of realization and something deeper crossing his features. "The children's hospital," he said quietly. 6 months ago, the pediatric ward." Suddenly, the memory came flooding back to Sophia. She had been visiting Grace during one of her treatment sessions when she heard crying from the room next door. A little boy had been terrified about an upcoming procedure, and his father looked helpless, not knowing how to comfort him. Sophia had quietly approached and asked if she could help. She had spent an hour with the child, sharing stories about brave nights and magical adventures, teaching him simple breathing exercises she had learned during Grace's treatment. By the time the nurses came to take him for his procedure, the boy was calm and smiling. "You stayed with Oliver for 3 hours," Julian continued, his voice filled with quiet emotion. "The doctor said it was the first time he had not fought, them during a treatment. You made him feel safe." Oliver nodded enthusiastically. "You told me about the invisible dragons that live in hospitals, and how brave knights learn to make friends with them instead of fighting them. I was not scared anymore because you showed me how to be brave." Sophia felt tears pricking at her eyes. "I remember now. You were getting treatment for your asthma complications. But I never knew your father was Julian Blackstone," he finished. "I tried to find you afterward to thank you properly, but you had left before I could get your name. The nurses said you were there visiting your sister, but patient privacy laws prevented them from sharing any information." The web of coincidence. Woman in an expensive burgundy gown approached their small group, her smile sharp and calculating. Sophia recognized her from magazine covers. Rebecca Winters, Julian's former business partner and one of the most ruthless venture capitalists in Manhattan. "Julian, darling," Rebecca said, her voice honey-sweet but with an underlying edge. "I see you have found yourself a new charity case. How wonderfully predictable." Julian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Rebecca, I would like you to meet Sophia Chen. Sophia, this is Rebecca Winters. Rebecca extended a perfectly manicured hand, her eyes scanning Sophia from head to toe with obvious disdain. Charmed, I am sure. Tell me, dear, what brings you to our little gathering? Surely not the same interests as our usual attendees. Sophia felt her cheeks burn, but before she could respond, Oliver stepped forward with the fearless honesty of childhood. She is not a charity case, he said firmly. She is an angel. She helped me when I was scared, and she did not even know who we were. That makes her better than most of the people here. Rebecca's smile faltered slightly. How sweet. Children do have such vivid imaginations. It is not imagination, Julian said, his voice carrying a warning tone that made several nearby conversations. Pause. Sophia showed kindness to my son when she had no reason to, expecting nothing in return. That says more about her character than any amount of money or social status ever could. The deeper truth as Rebecca excused herself with barely concealed irritation. Julian turned back to Sophia with an expression she could not quite read. There is something else, he said quietly. Something I discovered when I was trying to find you after that day at the hospital. He pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph. It was a newspaper clipping from 2 years earlier showing a young woman pulling an elderly man from a car accident just moments before it caught fire. The headline read, "Local hero saves stranger in dramatic rescue." Sophia gasped. How did you find this? I hired a private investigator, Julian admitted. I know it sounds excessive, but what you did for Oliver meant everything to me. When I found this article and then discovered 3 other instances where you had helped strangers in emergency situations, I realized something. He paused, his gray eyes intense. You are not just kind, Sophia. You are genuinely good. In my world, that is rarer than diamonds. Oliver tugged on Sophia's dress. Are you really a superhero? Because that would be so cool. Sophia laughed, kneeling down to Oliver's level. I am not a superhero, sweetheart. I just try to help people when I can, just like you will when you grow up. Actually, Julian said, his voice taking on a different tone, there might be more truth to that than you realize. The proposal Julian led them to a quieter corner of the hall, away from the main crowd. Thomas Mitchell, the head of security, approached them with a tablet in his hands. Mr. Blackstone, Thomas said quietly, I have the information you requested. Julian nodded and turned back to Sophia. 6 months ago, when you helped Oliver, you mentioned that you understood what it was like to be scared in a hospital because your sister was going through treatment. You said she was your hero because she faced every challenge with courage. Sophia nodded, wondering where this conversation was leading. I had Thomas research your sister's condition, Julian continued. Grace Chen, 16 years old, acute lymphoblastic leukemia, currently not responding to standard treatments. Sophia's breath caught. How did you... The experimental treatment she needs, Julian continued. CAR T-cell therapy at Memorial Sloan, Kettering. The insurance company denied coverage, citing it as investigational. Total cost, including hospital stay and follow-up care, $450,000. Sophia stared at him in shock. Yes. But how could you possibly know all of that? Julian smiled, and for the first time that evening it reached his eyes completely. Because 6 months ago, a stranger showed my son that the world still contains genuine kindness. Tonight, I would like to return that favor. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a check made out to Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center for the full amount of Grace's treatment. Sophia's hands shook as she stared at the check. I cannot accept this. This is too much. I came here tonight hoping to find someone who might know about grant programs or payment plans. I never expected—" "You never expected kindness to be repaid with kindness," Julian finished. "That is exactly why you deserve it." Oliver bounced excitedly. "Does this mean the angel lady's sister will get better?" "It means she will have the best possible chance," Julian said, ruffling his son's hair. The real question tears were streaming down Sophia's face now, and she did not care who might be watching. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for someone you barely know?" Julian's expression grew serious. "Because 6 months ago I was a father watching his child suffer, feeling completely powerless. You walked into that room and gave Oliver something I could not buy with all my money: peace. You gave him courage." He paused, looking out at the crowd of wealthy socialites. "I have spent years surrounded by people who want something from me. Money, connections, status. You are the first person I have met who gave something precious without expecting anything in return." "But this is so much money," Sophia protested. "Money I can make back," Julian said simply. "What you gave my son was irreplaceable. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "I have a feeling this is just the beginning of our story." Oliver grabbed Sophia's hand. "Does this mean you will visit us sometimes? I have so many new dragon stories to tell you." Sophia looked down at the sweet, hopeful face of the little boy she had comforted in a hospital room, then up at his father, whose gray eyes held depths she was only beginning to understand. "I would like that very much," she said. As the gala continued around them, Sophia held the check that would save her sister's life, surrounded by the most unlikely family she could have imagined. For the first time in years, she believed that miracles were not only possible, sometimes they found you when you least expected them. The evening was far from over, and she sensed that the biggest surprises were yet to come. 3 weeks after. The gala. Sophia stood in the sterile hallway of Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, watching through the glass window as her sister Grace underwent the CAR T-cell therapy that had once seemed impossible. The check from Julian Blackstone had not only covered the treatment, but also provided for the best medical team and private room Grace could need. Dr. Amanda Foster, Grace's oncologist, approached with a warm smile. "The initial response is better than we hoped, Sophia. Grace's body is accepting the modified cells beautifully. Her latest blood work shows significant improvement." Sophia felt her knees go weak with relief. She is really going to be okay? "It is still early, but all signs point to a full recovery," Dr. Foster confirmed. "Your sister is a fighter, and now she has the best weapon science can provide." Through the window, Grace caught sight of Sophia and waved, her smile brighter than it had been in months. Even with the medical equipment surrounding her, she looked more alive than she had in years. Sophia's phone buzzed with a text message from Julian. "Oliver insists on visiting Grace today. He has made her a get-well card with dragons on it. Are you free this afternoon?" The unexpected visit. That afternoon, Julian and Oliver arrived at the hospital carrying a massive bouquet of sunflowers and a carefully wrapped package. Oliver practically bounced down the hallway, his excitement infectious. "Is she really getting better?" Oliver asked, his young face serious with concern. "Daddy explained that she has the same kind of sickness I had, but worse." "Much better," Sophia assured him. "The doctors say the treatment is working." When they entered Grace's room, Oliver immediately walked over to her bed with the solemnity of someone on an important mission. "Hi, Grace," he said formally. "I am Oliver. Your sister is my angel friend. I brought you a present." Grace, despite her fatigue, smiled widely. "Nice to meet you, Oliver. I have heard so much about you." Oliver carefully unwrapped his package, revealing a leather-bound journal with Grace's adventure book embossed on the cover. "My daddy said you like to write stories. This is for all the adventures you are going to have when you get better." Grace's eyes filled with tears as she accepted the gift. This is the most beautiful journal I have ever seen. Thank you. Julian watched the exchange with quiet satisfaction, but Sophia noticed something deeper in his expression. Over the past weeks, he had visited them several times, always bringing Oliver, always finding excuses to check on Grace's progress. What had started as repayment for a kindness was becoming something else entirely. The growing connection. As Grace dozed after their visit, Julian and Sophia walked through the hospital's garden area, Oliver running ahead to examine every flower and butterfly he encountered. "You did not have to keep visiting," Sophia said. "The treatment is paid for. You have already done more than enough." Julian stopped walking and turned to face her. "What if I told you this has nothing to do with obligation anymore?" Before Sophia could respond, Oliver came running back with a handful of dandelions. "Look what I found! Daddy, can we make wishes?" "Of course," Julian said, kneeling down to Oliver's level. "What are you going to wish for?" Oliver thought carefully, his face scrunched in concentration. "I wish for Grace to get completely better, and for Angel Sophia to stay in our lives forever." He blew on the dandelion seeds, watching them scatter in the breeze. Then he looked up at his father expectantly. "Your turn, Daddy." Julian took a dandelion, his eyes meeting Sophia's over Oliver's head. "I wish for second chances," he said quietly, and blew the seeds into the wind. The business revelation. The next evening, Julian invited Sophia to dinner at his penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. Catherine Vale, his trusted assistant, had arranged for Oliver to have a sleepover with his best friend, giving the adults time to talk privately. The apartment was elegant but warm, filled with Oliver's artwork and family photos, rather than the cold corporate luxury Sophia had expected. Julian cooked dinner himself, surprising her with his skill in the kitchen. "Most people assume I survive on takeout and business lunches," he said, plating a perfectly prepared salmon dish. "But cooking relaxes me. It is one of the few times when I can create something without worrying about profit margins or board meetings." As they ate, Sophia found herself sharing stories about her childhood with Grace, their parents' accident, and the years of struggle that had led her to that fateful night at the gala. Julian listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights that showed he truly understood the weight of responsibility she had carried. "I have a confession," Julian said as they moved to the living room with glasses of wine. "The night of the gala was not entirely coincidental." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I had been looking for you for 6 months," he admitted. "When my investigator finally tracked down your identity, I learned about your work at the marketing firm, your financial situation, and Grace's illness. I may have influenced Elena's boss to offer her that invitation, knowing she would likely give it to you." Sophia stared at him in shock. "You orchestrated the whole thing?" "Not the whole thing," Julian said quickly. "I had no idea how badly you would be treated at the door, or that Mrs. Harrison would try to have you thrown out. I planned to find you inside and approach you properly. When I saw what was happening, I had to act." The heart of truth Sophia set down her wine glass, her mind racing. "So this has all been some elaborate charity project? You felt sorry for the poor girl who helped your son?" "No," Julian said firmly, moving closer to her on the couch. "It started that way, I admit. But Sophia, these past weeks, getting to know you, watching you with Grace and Oliver, seeing your strength and kindness, every day. This stopped being about gratitude a long time ago." He took her hands in his. "I am falling in love with you, not the woman who helped my son, not the struggling sister trying to save her family, but you, the woman who finds joy in Oliver's dragon. Stories, who makes Grace laugh even from a hospital bed, who treats my housekeeper and driver with the same respect you show me." Sophia felt her heart racing. "Julian, we come from completely different worlds. I am a graphic designer from Queens. You are one of the most powerful men in New York. Worlds that matter less than what we build together, Julian said. Oliver adores you. Grace thinks of you as the sister who saved her life, but also as someone who found her own happiness. And I... He paused, his voice becoming softer. I have never felt this way about anyone. The final choice, a week later, Grace was discharged from the hospital with a clean bill of health. The doctors declared the treatment a complete success, with no remaining cancer cells detected in her system. The celebration at Sophia's small apartment was intimate but joyful, with Julian and Oliver bringing champagne and a cake decorated with tiny dragons. As the evening wound down, Julian asked to speak with Sophia privately on the apartment's small balcony. Grace is going to be fine, he said, looking out over the Queen's skyline. Your job here is done. You could go back to your old life, and I would understand. But, Sophia prompted, sensing there was more. Julian turned to face her, his gray eyes serious but hopeful. But I am hoping you will choose something different. Oliver starts at a new school in the fall, and he has been asking if you could help him adjust. Grace mentioned she might want to transfer to a college closer to Manhattan to study creative writing. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and Sophia's breath caught. I am not asking you to marry me tonight, Julian said quickly. This is a promise ring. A promise that whatever we build together, we build as equals. Your kindness taught my son to be brave. Your strength showed me what real courage looks like. And your love? He paused, his voice thick with emotion. Your love has given me hope for a future I never thought I could have. Sophia looked at the ring, then at Julian's face, then through the window at Grace, who was laughing at one of Oliver's animated stories. I love you too, she said simply. I think I have since that first night when you defended me in front of all those people. But Julian, I never want you to think I am with you for your money. Impossible, Julian said, slipping the ring onto her finger. You fell in love with me before you knew who I was, just like I fell in love with you when I thought you were just a kind stranger in a hospital hallway. The new beginning. 6 months later, Grace enrolled at Columbia University on a full scholarship. Her creative writing professors amazed by the depth and maturity of her work. She often said that surviving cancer had given her stories worth telling. Sophia moved into Julian's penthouse but kept her job at the marketing firm, eventually starting her own design company with Julian's business guidance but her own creative vision. Her first major client was Blackstone Industries, though Julian was careful to let her earn the contract on merit. Oliver thrived in his new school, often regaling his classmates with stories about his angel stepmother and the dragons. She had taught him to befriend. He never lost his fascination with her tales, but now he created his own, showing the same creative spirit that had first drawn Sophia to his family. On their wedding day, held in the garden where Oliver had once made wishes on dandelions, Grace served as maid of honor and Oliver as ring-bearer. In her wedding speech, Sophia thanked Julian for showing her that sometimes the best things in life come disguised as impossible coincidences. A year ago, I crashed a party where I did not belong, she said, looking out at the crowd of friends and family. Tonight I know I am exactly where I am meant to be. Julian raised his glass for the final toast. To Sophia, who taught us that true wealth is not measured in money, but in the courage to love without expecting anything in return. As the sun set over their celebration, Sophia realized that the story that had begun with rejection and humiliation had become something far more beautiful than she could have ever imagined. Sometimes, she thought, the greatest adventures begin with the smallest acts of kindness, growing into love stories that change everyone they touch. The dandelion seeds Oliver had blown into the wind that day in the hospital garden had carried their wishes further than any of them had dared to dream. The end.